Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here to be sharing some of my thoughts about transformation driving change. I feel like I have to start out with a confession. I'm a New Yorker, native, born and bred. People think I've never been anywhere else. I went to college here, I went to graduate school here. It's in my blood. And from that unique perspective and vantage point, I get to run a significantly impactful and important organization, which is the United Way of New York City, that I'm very excited about. When I was in college, I was actually born and raised in the South Bronx. My family moved to Harlem when I went to college, not far from there. And that's where I live today. So it was not that far from where I live today. And when I was in college, I actually worked at the New York Times in its original building, not far from here. And when I would leave in the evening, I was a copy person. So my job was to make copies and get coffee and take care of the reporters at the various editorial desks. And when I would leave, when the paper was being put to bed pretty late at night, I got to experience Times Square late at night. And I can tell you that the people that I bumped into, that I tripped over, they would not recognize Times Square today. It has transformed significantly in my lifetime. I don't think I'm that old. So to have seen such significant change in the city of New York in such a short period of time, I grew up in a community where, the famous epithet was "the Bronx is burning." It was very, very challenged. In Harlem, where there was lots of vacancy and abandonment and challenge. And the city has gone through a significant transformation. Being a New Yorker and being at United Way of New York City, I appreciate all of the growth that we've had, but I appreciate as well that we are still very challenged as a city. Today in New York City, 46% of New Yorkers, our neighbors, are living at or near poverty. Today in New York City, there are 1.5 million New Yorkers that are not sure where their next meal is coming from. Today in New York City, 100,000 people are homeless, including 40,000 children. And 70% of the kids that go to public school in New York City are not reading on grade level. We've got big issues. We've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go. My work and role at United Way of New York City and the work that we do is very unique. We have a very unique vantage point to look at and appreciate and to deal with these very, very complex and outsized problems. We have a very, very strong relationship with the corporate sector. We were essentially born of the corporate sector. The corporate titans of the day, 75 years ago, right after the Great Depression, created the United Way to pool resources to serve the needs of vulnerable New Yorkers. We have a very, very strong relationship with the nonprofit sector. We've invested for 75 years. We know what works, we know what doesn't work, we know neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community, what's happening and what the needs are. And we have a very, very strong relationship with the public sector. We have a strong partnership with the government. It has allowed us to take what we've learned in the field, in neighborhoods, to solve some of the complex challenges and problems, and take it to the government for broad system change. It's a very, very unique spot. We're like insiders in these three very distinct and important sectors: the business sector, the nonprofit sector, and the public sector. And our job is to be activists inside to get the outsized change that we need and require for New York City. The problems, as I've described them, sound, just how do we wrap our arms around them? And some days it certainly feels that way. But the approach that we are taking and that we have taken is one that we believe and we know will drive significant transformation and change and will get us continuing to move in the right direction. There are three core components to how we've organized ourselves to work. One is identifying a pinch point, a key area of focus where you can see a small shift that will have a huge ripple effect. The second is appreciating the impact of the collective, that it will take the marshaling of resources, distinct and disparate, but connected, in order to get the results. And the results is the shared value. That's the third issue, that the impact that we need to have to move the needle for the New Yorkers that I talked about impacts all of us. It benefits all of us. So the first thing is the pinch point. A great example of a pinch point comes from history, World War II. During World War II, the Allies had a war strategy where they had ground troops, air troops, troops on water. They were bombing munitions facilities. It was a complex, multi-tiered strategy. At the end of the war, one of the Nazis' chief architects of their war strategy said, if the Allies had bombed one particular ball-bearing factory repeatedly, relentlessly, if they had just focused on that pinch point, we would have been devastated, paralyzed, obliterated. The war would have been over months, if not years, before it actually ended. So that's an important concept. Trying to find an area that if you keep pounding away at it, it's going to have significant outsized impact. The pinch point that we are focusing in on is the classroom in third grade. It's fun, idyllic, they're beautiful, cute children, but what we know is that whether or not a child can read by the end of third grade is the biggest predictor of whether or not that child will graduate from high school. If you're not reading on grade level by the end of third grade, you are 74% more likely to drop out. And we all know what some of the statistics are about dropping out. 68% of inmates did not graduate from high school. We know that if you don't graduate from high school, society has to pay an additional $8 billion a year to help provide supportive services to people who are undereducated. $333 billion in lost economic opportunity for those individuals. But I think the most important impact is the impact that it has on our innovation and economy. If we were able to solve the achievement gap with just Black and Latino students, getting them to where white students are, our GDP would increase by $525 billion a year. We used to be the #1 producer of high school graduates 30 years ago. If we were to reclaim that spot, our GDP would increase by $23 trillion. So that impacts all of us. It's shared value that we get when we make the changes that we need to make. So the pinch point is very important. The second issue and the second approach is about the collective impact, the solution. While the pinch point is important, we know that there's not a magic bullet that's going to get our kids reading by third grade. We're launching an initiative called Read NYC to double the number of third graders reading on grade level in 10 of the toughest neighborhoods of New York City, like the neighborhood I grew up in, like the neighborhood I live in, neighborhoods in Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, every single borough in the city of New York. And we want to be able to demonstrate what works, how we can impact that pinch point. But what we know is that a kid, say, in the Bronx, where I grew up, let's just call him Johnny, he's got a lot of factors that are impacting his ability to read. He's got asthma because he lives in a community that has all of these environmental factors that are impacting him, so he misses school a lot. He's got a mother who has income insecurity because she doesn't have a high school diploma. She needs food stamps. She needs support for rent so that she's not one of those homeless families, and he has a stable place to stay. He needs to make sure that his teacher has the training that she needs and it's connected to the after-school provider. So we've got to collect all of the players that we need to get together to get Johnny to read, lock arms, assemble them efficiently and effectively, provide an opportunity to share information about how Johnny is doing in real time, and all march to getting him where he needs to be. That is collective impact, making sure that we have the right solution to a multifaceted problem. United, we can transform. And once we do that, once we have borne down on our pinch point, once we have collectively figured out the solution and the action plan, and we've aligned ourselves and we've held each other accountable, then we can get to that shared value. We all benefit, not only New York City, which is a leader and needs to continue to be a leader in innovation and in transformation. We have the largest public school system in the country. So if we can get it done here, we know you can get it done anywhere. So we're excited because we know that we've got everything we need. This is New York City after all. We've got the brains, we've got the brawn, we've got the resources. Now we just have to make sure we have the will. And I'm excited to share with you today some of our approach and thoughts about how to get to outsized change, making sure that we're bearing down on those right pinch points, that we're having a solution that matches the problem, knitting together the resources that we need, and unlocking the shared value. So here we are. We've set the course. We're going to double the number of kids reading on grade level, and we're going to change the future of this city. Thank you.